You're good looking.
Ladies and gentlemen, tonight your DJ is a clown. Clap your hands. Clap your hands. Clap your hands. Hello, little friend. Now shove it up your ass.
You're good looking.
Hey, it's me, and welcome to Team HQ Trump Mafia. And yeah, the halfling, Zelensky, is a clown, but he has always been a puppet, even way back when. The most corrupt nation on earth, the poorest country in Europe, and of course their military is a joke. And so even the New York Times is now saying, hey, Ukraine should negotiate for peace, right? Give up some territory. Because if Zelensky was a real president, which he's not, he would have negotiated peace even in March, and he would still have more of his country left. But, you know, he has a mansion in Tuscany, Italy. He has a mansion in France. He has a mansion in Israel. And I'm sure he has billions in the bank now. He doesn't care about Ukraine, let's be honest. This is a performer. And he's now giving the performance of his life, right? And for that, he grew some stubble, and he's wearing, a T-shirt and looking like the man of the people, like he's semi-military. But again, it's a performing monkey, and he's a joke. But so is Biden. China Joe is also a puppet. He's also a performer. But the problem is that performer always forgets his lines, and he also talks out of turn. Now, the whole rationale for the proxy war against Russia is that you're defending democracy. Ukraine is not a democracy. But also it was about unifying the EU. The EU is not unified. In fact, they're squabbling like never before. To unify NATO. Well, NATO is also having all this squabbling, and there's disunity. Out of 195 countries, 165 refused to sanction Russia. So it means basically 30 nations are doing it. And again, where's the unity, right? So you're talking about the colonial powers of old acting out, and it's not working. On the battlefield, after 95 days of the daily Russia is failing, it turns out that Russia had been winning the whole time. And the narrative about Mariupol was the biggest battle of them all. But if you look at what really happened in Mariupol is Russia arrived, they took it in less than 4 days. just because Azov and the 36th Marines ran to a factory on the outskirts of Mariupol, where they don't affect anything on the battlefield, that doesn't mean it's a battle. They were sitting there for weeks, eating rats and, playing Candy Crush. That's not a battle. The battle for Mariupol took just like 72 hours. The Russians basically arrived and the Ukrainians ran away. So that wasn't the biggest battle. In fact, there hasn't really been a biggest battle yet. And now, of course, the battle for Donbass as a whole, it's not about one city, but that could be seen as the major battle. And Russia's easily winning. They're methodically advancing. And they encircle a lot of troops. In a military sense, Russia has been performing like a machine. And it's been a great success. And so Putin has 80% approval rating in Russia. And of course, China Joe was saying that the ruble would crash. The markets in Russia would crash, blow up, he said. Of course, none of that happened. The ruble is stronger than ever. It's on a 2-year high now. And the oil prices are through the roof. Russia's getting very rich. And that special operation has been paid for 1 million times over because of Biden sanctioning the USA before sanctioning Russia. And in fact, the sanctions on the USA are worse than the sanctions on Russia. Now, what kind of a country would open its border, then sanction itself? Well, we're that country because somebody thought it would be a better idea to decide who becomes the president and install a dementia patient. And so you look at the EU, NATO, it's a joke. And you then look at Russia, and they've been calculating and factoring in all the different options and all the different actions that the EU was going to take, that the Biden regime was going to take. And that's why they never would have done this with President Trump in office, because President Trump is unpredictable, and they wanted to have a sure thing. And they counted on the incompetence of the EU, of NATO, and of course China Joe, who is completely compromised not only by Ukraine, but also by Russia. Yeah, Hunter Biden took money from Russia. And so you never know if China Joe was really basically handing the whole south of Ukraine to Russia, and that this whole thing is like a game theater, because now they're all basically saying, well, Russia will keep those territories, they're not going to leave. And that could be very true. But is it on purpose or not? Because driving the oil prices up has been on purpose to quote unquote transform the economy. So it's all on purpose. And you look at the chaos that you had in Afghanistan. Isn't that similar to the chaos created in Ukraine to get refugees, right? To get a distraction. But in the end, everything backfires. And that is because the people that are in charge now are complete idiots. And that includes the idiots at the Pentagon. Now, all this propaganda I see out there, Russia is depleting itself, they're suffering, they're failing, all these generals got killed, and wow, 30,000 Russians died, and it's all not true. It's all not true. Because if you have to report the facts, and I do it, then you realize that this has been a mega success for Russia, what they did, including the feint on Kharkov, the feint on Kiev. You know, that all worked like a charm, and it divided up the Ukrainian forces. Anyone who thinks Russia was going to try to take Kyiv with only 250,000 troops in total for the whole operation is dreaming. And to then take 2 big cities in Ukraine with that few troops, it doesn't make any sense. In fact, for Kyiv, that area, they only had 30,000 troops. How many troops did the Nazis need to take Kiev in World War II, 500,000 just for one city. And so the truth of this whole story is that we're doing narratives, propaganda, and damage control, and wasting a lot of money as usual. They think throwing a lot of money at something is a way to get a positive outcome. Well, in this case, it really doesn't seem so, right? Russia has a lucrative south and the whole coastline. They have control of the Sea of Azov, very important. All the oil and gas resources there. The east, and the Russian-speaking Ukrainians are actually welcoming the Russians. Yeah, they speak the same language, they have a common history, and the Ukrainians, we now know, they've been discriminating against Russian-speaking Ukrainians for more than a decade. And in fact, in the Donbass, they've been committing atrocities against ethnic Russians. This we now know is true. And you can see it also, the disrespect that the Ukrainians have for people that speak Russian in Ukraine, which is basically half the country. And so that was a mistake. And instead of getting rid of all these Azov Nazis, Zelensky went to Kharkov and they created a new Azov division, and it's called Azov Kharkov. So they're doubling down on the Nazi stuff. How stupid is that? And so you realize that you can't change these people. They are anti-Russia. They are pro-Nazi. And they're financed and supported by colonial powers. And that's what it is. They always look at Ukraine like it's a colony. And they're now eyeballing Russia to be a colony for the EU. And guess what? It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. In fact, if they're not careful, Russia will expand its operation. They can easily take Kharkov. Maybe they will. Maybe they won't. Let's see.